And we're live.
All right. Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting tonight on Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, the public will not be allowed to physically access this Board of Selectmen meeting. However, public comments and questions may have been submitted to the board in advance of the meeting by completing the Google form prior to the meeting by Tuesday, January 19th, 2021 by 4:30 p.m. Also, the meeting will be broadcast via live via Seekonk Cable TV 9 and streamed live on Seekonk Town Hall Facebook page. A link to this Zoom was also provided on the agenda, and according to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 20F, requires any person recording must notify the chairman at the beginning of the meeting. There's nobody else that I'm aware of. That said, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Since we normally do a pledge of allegiance here, but without having a flag. We're going to go on to the board and committee openings, please.
Volunteers are needed on the Board of Assessors, 1 Board of Selectmen appointment, Capital Improvement Committee, 2 Board of Selectmen appointments, Commission on Disability, 5 to 13 Board of Selectmen appointments, Economic Development Committee, 5 Board of Selectmen appointments, Energy Committee, 1 Board of Selectmen appointment, Historical Commission, 3 Board of Selectmen appointments, Parks and Recreation, 1 Board of Selectmen appointment, Recycling Committee, 3 Board of Selectmen appointments, and Zoning Board of Appeals, 2 alternates.
Okay, thank you. General business, item A, consider the conditional offer of employment for Donna Wunschel for the position of Communications Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I just want to apologize to the members of the board. There was just an oversight. I know typically we provide all the documentation for the candidates. I had assumed and thought that Donna was included in my first initial email to the board back in November. I did send that out to the board, so I just hopefully the board would consider this tonight. But just to give you a rundown, Donna was one of the top 3 candidates. She has 20 years experience in public safety. She has spent 22 years with the Dartmouth Police Department as a dispatcher and trainer. She's an instructor for the Commonwealth Police Services. She's also certified as an APCO instructor, which is the Association of Public Safety Communications. She's attended the full-time Plymouth Police Academy. She maintains her certification as an EMT. She actively serves as a reserve police officer. She's the firearms licensing administrator for the Mattapoisett Police Department. She was the dispatch supervisor for the Fairhaven Police Department, and she has extensive training and certifications for both public safety and communications as a police officer. As the board is aware, the initial offer was given to another applicant who withdrew. Our second candidate accepted an offer. So we went back down to the third candidate. We actually had a second interview. I did have the opportunity to interview Donna the first time around. The hiring committee included, and Carol, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been on a couple of interview committees recently. So make sure I get this one straight. So it was Carol, Chief Enos, and Chris Testa. Chris Testa, unfortunately, this was one of the meetings she was not able to be in. So I filled in for this one particular interview. So I had the opportunity to interview her. We pulled her back in, and I said, Carol and I, we had a conversation further, asking some, lengthy questions. And we had about probably a good 45-minute hour conversation, at which point both Carol and I felt that she would be a great fit to the organization, would actually fit in really well. I think her background experience, as I mentioned before, especially as a trainer, lends itself very well. She has a diverse background, right? So she understands the police side, she understands the EMT side. So I think that in itself is going to also help to, bring the department to the next level. I'll turn it over to Carol if Carol wants to say anything, if I didn't cover everything.
No, I mean, I think you covered it very well. I apologize. I was trying to work on the town website also. It looks as though something's missing on there. No, you hit the nail on the head. You did attend that particular initial interview because Chris Testa was unable to attend. Basically everything that Mr. Kadim said, I'm familiar with her background. She has extensive knowledge in the field. She is currently a reserve police officer. She is an EMT. She maintains all the certifications that would be necessary for her to be a dispatch supervisor, which is actually a difficult feat for a lot of dispatchers. There are actually certifications that you have to take prior to getting to that level of training. And she was able to do all of that throughout her career. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vieira.
You want to wait till after the motion is made and seconded?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and do that?
Okay. I'll offer a motion to approve.
Second.
Good, thank you. Discussion.
Carol Ann, I'm going to put this right in your lap because no one knows better than you. Can she fill your shoes?
That's I appreciate that because I'm going to take that as a compliment, but I would say that she's probably going to outshine me. I think this particular individual is going to far exceed anything that I would have been able to do in that department.
Okay. That's all I need to hear because I think you did an excellent job there. You know the task at hand isn't an easy one. So again, I'm going to take your word, and if for whatever reason we fall short, I'll dial you up.
That's fair.
Okay.
All right, does anybody else have any other comments? All set? All right, I'm all set. Carol Ann, I appreciate the update too. You contacted me the other day. Sounds like you got an excellent candidate on your hands here. So looking forward to seeing how Mrs. Wunschel can, take the department or take the communications department to the next level. So with that, I'd like to take a roll call vote, please. Mr. Petronio is out tonight. He may join us later on, but for the remainder here, we'll start as we would normally sit in a room, and that would start with you, Mr. Vieira.
Dave Vieira, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to again thank the board for the understanding and apologize for the oversight.
Yep, no problem. Okay, item B, consider the appointment of Margaret Perkins to the position of Community Liaison for Human Services.
Mr. Chairman, as the board knows, the last board meeting, we had a resignation that was accepted. Maggie is actually working for us already. She's paid under the state grants. So what we're looking to do is, since the position opened up, is to really kind of shift her over onto the town side, especially with the unknown of the grant. So she would be, if the board approves this tonight with the appointment, and again, this is really just some housekeeping matters just to make sure she is appointed on that side so that we'd still utilize the grant and the town. So she'd be getting some additional hours, but working under 20 hours. So it would still be a part-time position. But this also would help to assist the human services in terms of the work that they need. And in the event that the state formula grant is reduced, we'll be able to reallocate some of those fundings to other needed items, whether it be equipment or supplies.
So move.
Second.
Any other discussion? Mr. Zora.
Yes, could you just explain for the people out there that may not know what exactly this position is as far as liaison for the community?
Yeah, so they just pretty much assist the human services with running the various programs that are going on over at Human Services and working in the kitchen, things of that nature. So they're really just the the liaison to the seniors to make sure that we're meeting their needs and working on the programs that we have.
Mr. Vieira.
On a light note, last week I received a call from Human Services on a well-being check. I had never received one before. I realize I'm of that. But it was a well-being check. I thought that was great. And I was speaking to another individual today on the campaign trail here, and that person advised me the same, that they received a call as well, and they were thrilled. So again, hats off to Brittany, and keep the program going.
Yep. No, Brittany does a phenomenal job. We saw that through the beginning of COVID, taking the initiative to reach out to, I believe it was 1,200 to 1,700 seniors to make sure that we were doing well-being checks, and they continue to do that. So kudos to that group. They've got a great team over there. I know Maggie does a phenomenal job. She's on the call as well, and she'll continue to do great things. So.
Thank you.
Excellent. There are no other questions. Like take a roll call vote, please, starting with you, Mr. Vieira.
Dave Viera, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Kristen Sullivan, aye. Okay, thank you. Item C, consider the annual designation of Sharon Lynn Hall as Animal Control Officer per Mass General Law, Chapter 140, subsection 151.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have Sharon, Andrea, and Jessica Blake on the call. So items C, D, and items C, D, and E are just annual designations that we've got to give to our animal control officers. So my recommendation is that we provide the designation of animal control officer to Sharon Lynn Hall per Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 140, Section 151.
Is there any objection if I make a motion to have C, D, and E all in one, or do they need to be all in one? Or can they be all in one, or do they need to be individual?
They can be all in one.
No
Second.
objection here.
So that's my motion.
Motion to approve items C, D, and E.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussions? All right, roll call vote, please, Mr. Vieira.
Dave Viera, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Okay, item F, consider and vote on the Animal Control Officer warrant.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn this over to Andrea and Sharon just to speak to the warrant. Again, this is also a yearly approval that we typically do with animal control.
Mr. Kadim and the board. The copy of the warrant, I actually don't have it in front of me. I had an appointment after work and I forgot it. But it's as stated in the copy that you have. I don't know if you have any individual questions on it. I can do my best to answer them for you.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just go through the, and especially for the people at home, for the public, the first page. So number of dogs for the period of April 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, caught 35, confined 35, adopted were 2, claimed 31, DOA claimed 1, euthanized 1. So that was the total for 35. The number of cats for the period of April 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2020, 84 caught, 66 confined, adopted or sold were 38, DOA 18, euthanized 5, in a shelter 9, in foster 2, transferred 1, released 84.
You mean 11?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
11 for a total of 84. I apologize.
By released? What do we mean?
So they typically, and I can let Andrea speak to this, but they typically do a catch and release program to neuter and spayter some of the wild cats. Yeah, the feral cats. So Andrea, if you want to speak a little bit more to it.
I had a little trouble hearing the question. What was the exact question?
By released, are you referring to catching and releasing of feral cats once they've been spayed or neutered?
Correct. That is what we do. Yes.
Thank you.
But
And-
not just the feral cats, correct? I mean, any of the cats that are obviously brought to the shelter or that you again, trapping. If they need to be spayed or they need to be neutered, that's what you do and then release them, correct? Not just.
Correct. So any cat that comes in, it either gets adopted or it's a feral release, and everything gets spayed and neutered before it leaves the shelter,
Right.
whether it be adopted or released,
And the reason for that is?
to control the population.
Okay.
And then tickets written from April 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020 for non-criminal offenses, failure to license, dog at large, failure to vaccinate against rabies, and failure to comply. Were 78. Total number of dog licenses that were issued from April 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2020 were 1,840.
Right.
You don't happen to have a dollar amount on that, do you, by any chance?
On the tickets,
That was brought in, yeah?
it should be on that warrant.
Not.
There isn't a
Not-
total, there isn't a dollar total on there. Just says number of tickets.
Okay, I can get that.
Okay, it's not earth shattering, it's just a question.
Yeah, it's just informational, right?
Right. Right.
And then the attachment, Mr. Kadim, at the end of this, I guess, is what's being referred to under the first paragraph of that second sheet. It says complaints
written.
have been made against the following named persons under the provisions of MGL Chapter 140 as amended. That's the attachment at the end, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Was there a motion?
We don't have a motion yet.
So moved. To approve.
Second,
All right, got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote, please, Mr. Viera.
Dave Viera, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Andrea. Let's see, item G, continued discussion regarding increased road traffic on Plainfield Street. So I received a phone call from Mr. Sagar, who's going to hop on here. I know that he's reached out to a number of other board members as well. He's representing himself as well as some others in terms of the action that we took on Plainfield Street going back to the December 16th meeting, where we were addressing a petition that was sent to us by 20-something, 21, 22 residents from that neighborhood, representing about 14 different homes in that neighborhood, concerned about the traffic and all of that. So that said, I'm going to ask that Mr. Sagar, if we can let him in. And then for those members or those people in attendance from the neighborhood, if you can kind of raise your hand so we can let you in as well.
Mr. Chairman, do you want us to do a screen share of Plainville? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let me ask what Mr. Sagar has, because he mentioned something to me that he was gonna have something to present. I just want to double check. Gary, can you unmute?
Okay, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yep, we got you. Are you, you're on your cell phone, right?
Well, well, hopefully, muted by our computer also. So we have logged in, but it doesn't seem to recognize it.
Okay. Your audio is not very good.
He's getting feedback. Do you have
Yeah,
a phone?
he'll have, yeah, if he has a computer on or possibly even the TV, he's gonna have to mute that so that he doesn't get the feedback.
All right, why don't I my phone off and see if you can get me on the computer.
Sure, give me 1 second and I'll fix that for you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yep.
And, yep.
Okay, thank you very much. I originally requested to be on the meeting of the first meeting of this month, but due to a heavy agenda, I was asked if I would wait and come to this meeting, so absolutely. I have some material that I'd like to share on the screens. I believe I provided to each one of the members of the Board of Selectmen a map of the original Baker's Corners plat, which goes back to February of 1911.
So how do we share?
Yeah, we have some, we wanted to share what we have. How do we do?
Just give me a moment. I'm gonna promote him to a panelist and see if I can get him to share.
In the meantime, currently from the neighborhood, I have Carla Wannen, Daniel Knox, and Joyce and Joe. Let me give Mr. Sagar an opportunity to speak and present what he's going to do. We can have some discussion, and I'll obviously invite you guys in for a comment. So in the meantime, you can manually put your phones or computers on mute, but you'll be able to hear me. And then I'll let you know when we can open up to the residents in the neighborhood.
Did all of you get these the documents from Gary? Because I don't recall receiving them.
I didn't, but
I think it's in the packet, I believe.
The old roadmap?
Oh, I was looking in my email. Okay.
No,
I
yeah.
did see, I do have that image in my packet. All right.
Yeah, that's the only thing. It was a letter from him and the original survey from 1911.
right, I thought he was referring to something different.
Chairman, can you hear me?
We see your
I can,
screen.
yep, and we can also see your screen, so you are sharing your screen.
Okay. Okay, sharing the screen, you can see the map of the Baker's Corners plat.
Yes.
Everybody can see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. This plat, as I said, was originally designed and laid out in February of 1911. Was recorded a few months later in the Registry of Deeds. It has, as you can see here, Plainfield Street, along with Pine Street, and two other streets that I will be referencing a little later, Greenfield Street and also Bloomfield Street. Plainfield Street, and first of all, let me just say this, that my goal in doing this is to see Plainfield Street reopened and the residents' issues with traffic get addressed once and for all. I know they've gone quite a while where they feel the town has not been receptive to what they've been requesting. So hopefully we can all come together and for the benefit of everybody. Certain facts I like to share that I feel are pertinent. First and foremost, the public has the right to use all public ways provided their use is in accordance with all applicable laws and regulations. Property owners should not be subjected to any unlawful or reckless actions by any member of the public. So as I referenced, fact number 2, Plainfield Street is part of the 1911 Baker's Corners plan. So it'll be 110 years old this year. Now the street, the layout of the street is about 720 feet long. I remember at the last meeting, there was considerable discussion about the location of the fire hydrant. So I went to the water district, and according to their map, that last hydrant that was in discussion is approximately 650 feet from Pine Street. So it's just before Leicester, which is a paper street. Plainfield Street also to Brewster, approximately where you have the barricades, is about 500 feet to Pine Street. Plainfield Street also provides about 270 feet of frontage along Plainfield Street for what we'll call the Stop and Shop Plaza. And the plaza has the legal continued right to the second means of access to their frontage through Plainfield Street. Plainfield Street has been a resource utilized by many residents for over 6 decades. The Stop and Shop Plaza has existed for about 70 years, and they are a major taxpayer, community partner, and resource. Now, in Massachusetts, in a residential neighborhood, the maximum speed limit you can have is 30 miles an hour. And any residential area that is not posted otherwise has an assumed speed limit of 30 miles an hour. However, if you exited Plainfield Street onto Pine, if you went to the left towards Baker's Corners, the speed limit is 25. If you go to the right towards the railroad tracks, it is 30. To my knowledge, there's been no engineering or traffic study performed on Plainfield Street in advance of its closure. The traffic count on Pine Street in 2009 was estimated to be by a DPW director who's an expert in traffic and performed a study at 5,500 cars. And that was done for the reconstruction of the Richard Manor Fire Station. And certainly Plainfield Street was factored in or contributed as a resource for that study. The other fact of this is that the action taken by the Board of Selectmen, there was no input from the planning board. So I'd like to talk about potentially 3 legal issues, and I'm going to put these up on the board if I may. It'll be in the Word document. So I think we want to go to page 2. Yep, we'll go to page 2. Okay, potential legal issues. The agenda item for the Selectmen's meeting of 12/16/2020 states discussion regarding increased road traffic on Plainfield Street. The action was to close and abandon a portion of Plainfield Street. I asked this question for my service on the board and working with Mr. David Parker, who was always a very stickler about what an agenda item said and what the action was by the board. And is this beyond what may be interpreted as sufficient notice in accordance with the open meeting law? I'm just raising this issue for discussion, and I have certainly no issue in pursuing it any further. All right. On Plainfield Street, by the action that you've taken, is akin to abandonment of a municipal way. And so under Chapter 82, Section 32A, and it's there for everybody to read, but in the definition of abandonment, it's defining the town has become abandoned and unused for ordinary travel, which is certainly the case in this. So on item number 3, and so I raised that this issue from the public hearing and notice requirement is contained in this chapter, read also in accordance with item number 1 above. During my research, and I mean, I'm no attorney, but I did this all using our best friend on the computer, Google. The town's legal counsel, which is now KP Law, formerly Copeland and Page, published, and everybody can pull it up, in 2015, City and Towns Ways, a primer of the process of layout acceptance and acquisition. And under Part 2, acquisition of rights of way and ways and lots, under title research, I'll just read this if I may. Municipalities must ensure that they acquire rights in the way from persons owning the fee interest in the way. Fee interest is basically owning to the center line of the road. General laws 18358, known as the derelict fee statute, creates a presumption that each owner of a lot abutting a way owns the fee to the center line of the way as it butts his or her lot. It is often the case that owners abutting a way will own the fee to the land within the way, and the municipality must acquire rights in the way from the lot owners. Acquiring these interests from multiple owners may take considerable time and effort and in turn be costly. This section of the law may be applicable, which would need to be researched. If it applies, my understanding is the owners of the plaza, along with the owners of the property, the very southeastern portion of Plainfield Street, including the owners of the land of the Paper Street, Leicester Street, would need to be included in this action of closing, abandoning a portion of Plainfield Street. All right, so part of discussion, smart public policy with good old-fashioned common sense never complicates, compromises, interferes with, or in any way restricts full open existing access for public safety. Abandonment, closing of municipal ways should only be considered after all other reasonable traffic control initiatives have been researched and are implemented. At a minimum, assuming if none of the above quoted general laws are applicable, good public policy requires a public hearing before the action taken by the selectmen. While there can be no argument that closing their portion of Plainfield Street is detrimental to the interest of the tenants, Stop and Shop and CVS is also has the potential of a detrimental effect of the value of the plaza. The residents' petition include other suggested measures, including speed humps. These speed humps or speed bumps can be a long-term permanent solution at low cost. Unless and until we do a traffic study of Plainfield Street, we will never know the full scope of the problem we are attempting to remedy. The speed limit on Plainfield Street is 30 miles an hour. State law allows by petition of the town to the State Department of Transportation to reduce the speed limit to 25 miles an hour. Closing Plainfield Street will have an adverse effect of the traffic on Pine Street. This will result in the addition of traffic to the side streets off Pine, namely Greenfield and Bloomfield Streets, spilling onto others. The town recognizes this problem prior to closing Plainfield Street when it installed the striping in front of the Banner Fire Station because of the increase in traffic, causing increased stacking on Pine Street. It makes no sense to take the aggressive action of closing Plainfield Street to appease a few at the expense of many. Selectman Vieira stated at the end of the meeting, blocking will not solve the problem of speeding. Why then do we do it at significant expense? So my suggested initiatives are leave the existing barriers in place, remove the chain opening the road to one lane at the current location of the barriers. Having that reduced to one lane will serve as a temporary basis anyways as a speed deterrent. Install reduced speed limit signs. There's been discussion about the tractor trailers and other trucks, so I would suggest we ban all trucks over a certain weight on that street. Perform a full traffic study of Plainfield Street, including an update to the 2009 Pine Street study. Following the study, discussion on speed bumps, additional signage, including stop signs. Have a discussion of installing a radar speed limit camera, which will ticket speeding offenders. In a discussion with a couple of the neighbors, they informed me that several years ago, they were able, on a temporary basis anyways, to move the bus stop off of Pine Street. So I'd say we reach out to the school department and change the location to somewhere between Brewster and Chester. It's been 40 years since the town has accepted any portions of Chapter 90. So I would suggest that next town meeting, we accept to town meeting Mass General Law, Chapter 90, Section 17C, which will give the selectmen the ability to reduce speed limits without state approval. Currently, if you go to do it, you need state approval. If we accept this section of the law, you have to do it. You can reduce the speed limit down to 25 miles an hour as long as you notify the Department of Transportation. Increase other state laws which enhance traffic enforcement and increase police patrols. Those are suggested initiatives. And I'd just like to back up a little bit to Plainfield Street in itself. I mean, it's part of a subdivision that dates back 110 years. So there's very few documents in town hall about it. There was documents found in 46 and 51. I believe it was action of the town meeting that only talks about accepting Plainfield Street down to Brewster. However, under the prescription, acceptance by prescription, any road that's been in existing for at least 20 years and is used uninterrupted for a period of 20 years is considered acceptance by prescription. The water district installed that hydrant way down by what's on the corner of lot 178. And they certainly would never install that water line if it wasn't in the town way. So I think this closing of the road, I mean, that may in the end result be the result that you have to take, but I think that should be the final step and not the first step. And so I really feel strongly that this is something that's been a resource for everybody that lives in the north end of town for close to 70 years. And it should continue. And I certainly appreciate the concerns of the neighbors in that area. And I think if we all work together, the road has to be opened back up and we have to find a solution to the speeding that they complain about on Plainfield Street. I will stop right there, Mr. Chairman, but I would reserve the right to talk again if I may.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Mr. Sagar. Bear with us 1 minute. Okay. All right, you all set there, Carolyn?
I am. I'm just going to move him back into the attendees list.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Vieira?
Mr. Sagar raises some interesting points. However, as it relates to the speed cameras, as we heard a few meetings ago, they're not recognized or legal in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that rules that out. And as I said, with the speed limit signs, you could put speed limit signs, but again, somebody's going to have to be there to enforce them. Again, I mean, I think not that we should have jumped as quickly as we did. I will say that we had to take some action and we took action. And sometimes we get accused of taking action when we shouldn't, but we also get accused of not taking action when we should. So again, we took some action. Maybe it needs to be studied. I don't know. But again, I have my versions on what should have been done, what shouldn't have been done, and so on and so forth. But the points were well taken, and obviously Mr. Sagar, and I shouldn't use his name, I know, made some good points. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Andre.
So I did want to address a couple of things. And first, I want to apologize to Mr. Sagar because I was trying to set up a time to go out there and meet with him, especially over this weekend, but there was a family emergency that has prevented me from going this weekend and will prevent me from going over the next few weeks. But I did want to bring to light a couple of things, and one of them is being, as Mr. Sagar pointed out, that the road is basically abandoned. We haven't abandoned it, though I will say the action that was taken by DPW was a bit more than what we actually voted on at the meeting. It did do the essence of what we were trying to do. I know that during the meeting we discussed putting 2 Jersey barriers and a chain, and it's a little bit more than what's there right now is more than what we discussed that night. However, the reason for the action was the imminent danger to the public, and that was at least my reasoning behind it. However, how many times in growing up here in town have we seen police cruisers parked out here on the south end over near Crossroads convenience store, ticketing individuals who would use the cut through of that Crossroads convenience gas station to get from Fall River Avenue to Cole Street, and individuals will be stopped by the police, ticketed by the police, because you can't do that. And the reason for the action, that at least on my end and for the motion that was made, is that you have a private lot that is being utilized as a cut through, and on top of endangering the individuals that live in the development, you're also endangering the individuals who are going to that lot, to that Shaw's, to that Stop and Shop, to that CVS, and exposing them to being hit by a vehicle trying to do the cut through rather than going there for their regular business. That was the reasoning behind my motion, and that is again, I'll reiterate, we did not, if you look at the plan, you can see we didn't abandon the drawing. Plainfield was never intended to serve as a cut through directly to Newman Avenue. And you can look at it even back to 1911 when they subdivided it, and they did not provide a connection point or an access way through lot 201 at the time. And not taking action would only further endanger and expose the public. And though I understand it has been that way for 40 years, doesn't necessarily mean it's right. And and furthermore, with the development that's happened on that parcel with the Stop and Shop, with the CVS, leaving it open to people to continue to use it as a cut through would be irresponsible, at least in my opinion. I saw the feedback on Facebook where people who utilized that area as a cut through were upset that their routine is now altered. And though I understand it adds another few minutes to their drive, the risk that the cut through poses to the public far outweighs the inconvenience of another couple minutes to get through to Pine Street and down where they need to go. That's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I apologize. There was a couple of references that were made, and I just want to make sure that we touch on them. Sean, could you expound a little bit? Because I remember specifically that actions taken by the board do not necessarily, if it's on an agenda item, it does not mean that a vote can't happen on something. If it's listed as an agenda item for discussion, consideration, there can also be a vote taking place. Am I?
That's correct. So the point of the open meeting law is to notify the public of what is going to be discussed. The assumption is that during any agenda item, action can be taken or not taken. It truly is up to the board, but it gives the public the notice that there is going to be discussion on the issues that have been highlighted, which is why you try to be as detailed as possible as to what the item is going to be discussed on, so that they know. And people have filed open meeting law complaints with regards to that, saying that they didn't know there was going to be a vote taken, but you do not need to state that there's votes going to be taken on those agenda items.
And if I could just add, so as I mentioned to Mr. Segar over the phone when he and I did have a conversation on the matter, the research he did and the points he brought up are all good. Even the point he brought up to me, in my opinion, even the point that he brought up to me in conversation with respect to adding speed bumps along the roadway to help. And I said to Mr. Segar on the phone, though I do agree that it will help speed things down, it doesn't address the issue. It will help reduce traffic and speed on Plainfield Street, but it would not address the issue of people using the property from this map, lot 201, as a cut through and endangering those people leaving the store and everything else. And that's why I, for one, still stand by the vote that the board took a few weeks back. Again, though a simple 2 Jersey barriers and a chain would have sufficed. What's there is there, and it does what we intended the Jersey barriers and chain to do. So I don't think we took any actions that were wrong or out of place. We have an imminent risk to public safety, and we took that action to reduce that risk.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Andrew?
That's it.
Okay. Mr. Zora, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. With the traffic control device down at Central and Pine Street, can we have Mr. Cabral reach out to the state to update that timing over there? If cars are backing up now that Plainfield Street shut down because they can't utilize it as a cut through to get through to the red light, maybe petition the state or just have the DPW come down and add 10, 15, 20 seconds onto that light to give motorists more time to get through. Is that something Mr. Cabral or is that through your office, Sean, can reach
Mr.
out to me?
Kadim?
Yeah, so I was just waiting for Mr. Cabral to jump on, but maybe he can talk a little bit more about the process, but I can work with Mr. Cabral if he's not able to unmute himself to
Or if Scott's available?
elaborate, but yeah, we can potentially petition. Dave, are you there? Can you
Or
speak
maybe
to
it's
the
just a
process?
simple ask.
How's that? Can you hear me now, Sean?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, excellent. Yeah, I was having some problems trying to unmute, I guess. So in regards to the request to make changes to the traffic signal, the request is all good. However, it would require an engineering firm to do a study and justify the changes. Because keep in mind, the timings that were out there were all set based upon traffic volumes that were counted, with the engineers providing the timing for the lights based upon that traffic. So in the controller cabinet right now are those timings. And legally, those are the timings that are associated with the operation of that traffic light. Doesn't mean you can't change it. However, in order to change it, you would have to have a study done, traffic counts done for, extensive amount of times. I believe it might be 12 or 16-hour counts. And at the end of the day, any changes to the operation of that signal, which is striving to be optimized, would require that the state buy into the changes based upon an engineering study. Just going out there and concept saying we can add 5 seconds or 10 seconds of time to an approach is going to have ramifications on each and every other approach. And what the engineers did when that signal was designed was to allocate timings. There were some minor tweaks that were done. I believe there was 2 seconds of time added to southbound coming from Attleboro. But I did want to let people know that you can't just go out and make the changes. There's a process, engineering study involved, presenting it to the state, and then convincing the state that these changes are going to be justified in the overall operations of the signal, not just one particular approach.
But Mr. Cabral, wouldn't and again, this is an assumption, but if the traffic that was being diverted that was diverting itself through the cut through was not considered during that study that was done back then, wouldn't that warrant a relook at the traffic? Because if it does make sense, if you do have now an increased number of vehicles that are going to the light, the only way you're going to be able to tell that is by having another study.
That's correct. But overall, with the amount of volume of the main through traffic on Central Avenue, which is like 22,000 vehicles a day, I don't think it'll have a dramatic effect. But without doing that study, you might be adding, and again, it's per the peak hour of the day and the different operations that light is in operation. I personally don't think it's going to make a huge change out there. However, you're correct in that assumption that, yes, if there was some of that traffic cutting through and not ever getting to the light on Pine Street, there may be additional traffic and it might change it a little bit. So there is a worthy cause, I guess, to go through the exercise and see if it does in fact change anything. I just wanted to let you know that it's not just as simple as going out and making the changes ourselves. It would have to be done with the proper study and justification for it to occur. That's all.
It may be worth and just for Mr. Cabral, from a timing perspective here, given, the current pandemic, people working from home now, traffic patterns have changed, time of days have changed. Yeah. A lot of things could be in effect here, which I think could also be affecting, what was going on Plain Street as well.
Mr. Crow, what's the cost of the survey?
I would bet that you'd be probably spending somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 or $4,000 for the study, and then that would be presented to Mass DOT for consideration. Drafting up a signal plan and so on, probably in that ballpark figure. The study itself, probably in the $3,000 neighborhood. Adding the plan, if it were to be implemented, would probably be another few grand. So you're probably talking about $5,000 effort to try to, if there were changes to be made. But $3,000 to $4,000 to get the study done, at least in concept, and present to the state for consideration, most likely.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Vieira, and then at which point after you get done, Mr. Vieira, I don't want to go to the residents that we have on.
Okay, just one quick thing. Let's not forget that there are a lot of people out of work. probably seeing more traffic on Pine Street and Central Avenue than normal. Hopefully, when people go back to work, I don't know how much the traffic is going to be alleviated, but hopefully it will, and it won't be as serious a problem as it is right now. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Beer. That's kind of my point where, hopefully a year from now or even less, half a year from now, we'd be getting more back to a normal traffic pattern where we were sitting, this
Right.
time last year. All right, I'd like to go to some of the residents here. If the residents that would like to speak, if you could please raise your hand. And then I can go around and call you. So first I have Joyce and Joe. So if you could please unmute Joyce and Joe and state your name and address, please.
They haven't unmuted.
They haven't unmuted yet.
Oh.
How about now?
There we go. Joyce and Joe, hi, can you please state your full name and address, please?
Yeah, Joseph J. Silvestri, 15 Brewster Street.
Okay. How you doing, Mr. Silvestri?
I'm very, very well, Selectman. Yeah, I was a little surprised. Oh, well, actually, I wasn't surprised when I saw some of the feedback that came back from closing down plan. I didn't understand it that well, considering the fact that probably the residents of Brewster and Chester and Plainfield probably utilize that cut through more than anyone else, unfortunately. But we were more than willing to give it up for the safety of the neighborhood and for the children in the neighborhood. I myself now spend an extra amount of time on Pine Street, and I have not seen more traffic there than's been there before. I was there today. I timed out the lights quite a bit, and I'm always amazed at how good red lights work. And there were some people who waited at that Pine Street and Newman Avenue red light for 1 minute and 20 seconds. And there were some people who waited there for 17 seconds. And I'm talking about the first car in line that approaches the red light is, I assume, is when the red lights are activated to start to go through their changes. For this minimum amount of time, I just can't imagine why people would be so distraught about creating a safer area for that neighborhood. It's just amazing how we haven't had the speeders come down the street. Of course, we've had a few back up and peel out. Obviously not happy with the situation, but of course that has lessened over the last week or so. I really feel that the selectmen had made a great decision in doing this. I've been a resident of 15 Brewster for 35 years. My wife's father had a nursery on the corner of Plainfield and Brewster. Further back than that, they had Richo's nursery here. So she's more than familiar with the traffic that's been in this area. I really believe that the decision made was the decision that's going to really keep us the safest. And I laud the decision of the selectmen in doing it. Thank you.
I agree. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Silvestri. Next, I have Daniel Knox. Can you please unmute your phone, please?
Good evening. This is Daniel
Hello,
Knox.
Mr. Knox.
Oh, I'll let you take the lead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
So my name is Daniel Knox, and I live at 25 Brewster Street. I've lived here since December of 2016, and I have 5 children at my residence. Prior to the temporary barrier being put in place on Plainfield, we've experienced heavy traffic on Plainfield Street by individuals using it as a cut through to Newman Ave, to the Newman Ave Stop and Shop and CVS. And in addition, the bus stop for my twin 7-year-olds is located on the corner of Plainfield and Pine Street. Without block access to the cut through, individuals have driven through the bus stop with the bus's warning lights and sign activated, nearly hitting my daughters on multiple occasions. It's also my understanding that an alternative solution to the barrier with the speed bumps to lower the speeds of vehicles in the area wasn't possible to due to snow plow concerns. I wholeheartedly understand that patrons of Stop and Shop and residents use the cut through as an ease of access and avoidance of the light at the intersection of Newman Ave and Pine Street. However, it's my firm belief as a parent and a resident that the safety of small children in the neighborhood should be paramount to the convenience of using Plainfield Street as a cut through. So I just wanted to kind of add that element of empathy for parents in the area that are worried about their children at play or going to their bus stop, and individuals using this as a cut through and doing that at heightened speeds, and that again, reiterating what Joe said, is that we would use this cut through as well, and we decided that not using this and not having this traffic flow through the street would be in the best interest of the safety of our children and the grandchildren in the area and other children. So I just kind of wanted to bring that to light, that we took the safety of small children and families at heart here, and we would expect that if this was anywhere else in Seekonk where I heard this happening, similar situation, I would have empathy for the individuals living in that area, that they were trying to keep their loved ones safe, and that I might have to go out of my way to travel a little bit longer to get to my groceries or my pharmacy, so that they were safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. Next up, I have Mr. James Barrell. Can you please unmute your phone?
Yep, can you hear me?
Hi, Mr. Barrell.
Yes. Excuse me. James Burrell from 5 Chester Street. And I've lived here for 20 years. Previous speaker spoke about the years that the road's been accessed, and since 1911. And, we've been here for 20 years. 21 years ago, none of these houses were in this area. It was basically a commercial neighborhood. As another gentleman mentioned, there used to be a couple of greenhouses. I think 5 Brewster Street was a couple of greenhouses. 19 and 31 Plainfield Street were empty lots. 2 Chester Street was an empty lot. And I understand that 5, 15, and 25 Chester Street were a commercial building that was removed, and it developed 3 houses. So when the traffic used to cut through 21 years ago or so, there really wasn't much of a population in this area. But now you've got an additional 7, 8 houses that have been built here, paying a lot of taxes, and the streets changed. And I think the rules and the codes and the laws for using that as a cut through should have changed when all these houses moved in. As far as the fire hydrants being installed, I believe the person that built the duplex where the greenhouses were, I believe they paid for the hydrants to be built, not the town. And I know that because he dug up my yard to put in the fire hydrants, and they didn't come back and fix it. It was left a dirt pile and a mess. I had to plant seed, and I complained and I complained. I called the DPW, I called the town hall, and all they kept saying was, it's the developer's responsibility that dug it up that's building those houses. So the town didn't do that work. When you talk about the property behind the Stop and Shop, Seekonk doesn't maintain that property. Stop and Shop plows that area out. So they've maintained it for years. That road wasn't as bad 10 years ago because it used to be all potholes and dirt, and cars wouldn't cut through because they'd rip out their suspension. But about 10 years ago, I believe it was Stop and Shop that paid and had that re-asphalted. Once they had it re-asphalted, it turned into a highway. And now the cars are going in and out way more than they were 10 years ago. And, I've lived here. I have no problem going around Baker's Corner and avoiding the cut through. It's not that much out of the way. For the people that are, asking this to be opened up, I have to ask, is this a cut through that you go once a week to the grocery market, that you can't go to Baker's Corner, take a left and pull in the Stop and Shop for once a week or an occasional time to go to grocery shopping? Or are you using this for a cut through twice a day, every day, going and returning from work? Doesn't make any sense to me. You can talk to the workers that blocked that road off a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever it was. They had a difficult time doing with the traffic flying by here. They're over there trying to work, and people are swerving around them. They're trying to cut between them. They're trying to get through. And people got no respect for even the workers that are over there. Never mind the trucks that are loading and unloading, during the day with the traffic trying to cut through. And then there's really no reason to cut through that of the road. Why doesn't the town gift that piece of property to Stop and Shop, or have Stop and Shop buy that piece of property? There's really no reason to get to the other side of it. They maintain it, they plow it, they take all the responsibility. I don't really see what the problem is. And then, they can still grant the easement to get to that hydrant that was paid for by a local resident. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Burrell. Do we have any more of the residents? I'll get to you in a second, Mr. Andrews. Just want to get to the rest of the residents. Let's see, we have, all right, Mrs. Wanan.
Hi, this is Carla Wanan for representing 31 Plainfield Street. And I just, everyone sort of made a lot of points, so I don't want to take a lot of time out. Thank you for the opportunity. I just know that the street was designated years ago as a dead-end road. There was a sign that was put up that was at a petition that I had submitted several years ago, probably about, I can't remember exactly how long ago. And so that obviously didn't do anything to reduce the traffic on it. And the main concerns were also in terms of safety, that to reduce the commercial traffic on the road. And as people have mentioned, people are primarily using that to avoid the light and access Newman Avenue, not necessarily to access the CVS and the Stop and Shop. So it just feels a lot like this is an argument between convenience versus safety. So I just wanted to highlight that was the main concern that was brought before with the petition, and that's what we just wanted to highlight. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mrs. Lopes, I see that you're on, but don't feel obligated to make any comments. So I don't see your hand up here. Mr. Andrade, you had your hand up, and I'll just seek some final comments from the board here. I'll make a comment myself, and then we can move on to the topic here. So Mr. Andrade.
I just wanted to bring up two other points that were brought up, and Mr. Burrell brought up one, and that was of giving the land to Stop and Shop or anything. That would be an issue, in my opinion, because though Plainfield Street is not utilized, you do have lots that exist beyond Brewster Street. And then we would be creating landlocked parcels of land. I don't know if those can actually be built upon or developed, but it is a throughway, as a roadway, as Mr. Sagar pointed out, right? So we can't just go about doing something like that when there are people who own that land and potentially could develop it if it is developable. To touch on something that was mentioned earlier about if we approached planning, there's really nothing to approach planning on. We have not modified or altered anything that had been planned. We have a development that was not meant to be used as a main thoroughway, and we have not altered that in any way. And we've put a temporary measure in place to stop it from being acted in a way in which it was not planned for. So if anything, we further enforced the original planning of these parcels of land and did not in any way alter it in a detrimental fashion. So just wanted to clarify that point too.
Okay, thank you. I do have, I had a hand up from Mrs. Lopes. So Mrs. Lopes, if you could unmute your phone.
Yes, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just feel like I will not belabor this conversation further, other than to say I thank all of my neighbors that have stepped up to to be able to voice their opinions and share. And basically everything that they have said, I completely wholeheartedly support. Respectfully, these people that are asking for access, the immediate neighborhood are the 3 streets that make up this neighborhood. It isn't the folks on Pine Street and all the other streets. I'm sorry. And that's my respectful decision. I feel like there are lots of reasons that people are giving as excuses, quite honestly, to be able to do the wrong thing, which I do not feel we should support. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Lopes. Mr. Sagar, you had your hand up.
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. So I thank you for your time. I disagree with some of the comments, but it's obvious. I would just ask Mr. Andrade that, I know you made the motion and you just said it was a temporary solution. I would think that once that barrier is up, from what I hear, it's not going to come down. So I thank you for your time, and there's no sense in belaboring the point further.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sagar. Mr. Zora?
Yeah, Sean, Mr. Cabral, I reached out to Stop and Shop regarding this issue because I knew this was going to be on the board on our agenda for tonight. Is it possible to move those barriers over a few feet so their tractor trailers can swing out of their loading docks? We could just alter that a little bit, regardless if how the vote's going to go, if the chain's going to come up or come down, we're going to make it a 1 lane. If we can alter those barriers over a few feet or push them back. Is that something we could do easily, Mr.?
So before the barriers went in, I went and introduced myself to the manager of Stop and Shop, whoever was on duty that day. I know that I believe Chief Isabella had mentioned to them that he was, observing back there prior and all that. They were not opposed to the placement of the barrier. And I want to explain, there were some comments made about, almost overkill of the barrier. The barrier that were placed out there were done to provide functionality. I did speak with the gentleman at number 5 Brewster. I had concerns before I even talked to him about traffic driving over his lawn, because at the end of Plainfield at Brewster, if you were just to put 2 barriers, people would very much be able to drive across his lawn. And in fact, he told me years ago, there were barriers placed, and that's exactly what people did, is they drove across his front yard or the side yard with the frontage along the parking lot of Stop and Shop. So he was thrilled to have that barrier in place. We offset it, 5-foot openings between, to make it functional if people were walking, and to physically create a barrier that people wouldn't be able to get around. We also, where we placed the barrier, kept it close to Plainfield Street on the opposite side, so we wouldn't have to interfere with the loading area of that portion where the trucks go in. In addition to that, Stop and Shop had told me that they had spoken with all their drivers prior to us even showing up on site with the barrier or to do the work, informing their drivers not to utilize Plainfield Street, but all the deliveries would go through Newman Avenue, the intended access, and they had no problem with what they saw in the diagram before we placed those barriers with what we were presenting in terms of their operations to the docks. So I could certainly check in with them to see if they're experiencing any operational issues and can try to modify it accordingly. I have not heard one concern from anyone since we placed those barriers up there back on the 23rd of December.
Yeah, if you could just reach out to them just to do, now that they're in place, if you could just reach out to see if there are any issues, if there's any adjustments needed. I had spoken to her on Monday, and that was one of the concerns she had. It wasn't really a concern. It was just if we can move it over a little bit so they can swing out there with the larger trailers. If you could just do a wellness check on that, just to see how they're doing, I'd appreciate it.
That sounds good. Absolutely.
Very good. If nobody has anything else,
I have one more thing, and I apologize. However, we did receive an email, or I received an email, thanking me for and the board for the actions that we took and for me making the motion. But there was a mention in the email that I believe I forwarded over to Mr. Kadim, and I wanted to touch upon real quick, where the resident expressed some concern that police patrols would not be occurring in the neighborhood because the barriers were up. And I just, for those residents there in the neighborhood and anyone there, I just want to reassure you that any patrolling of the neighborhood, I think it was a mention of an officer saying that they wouldn't be able to patrol the neighborhood anymore. I don't know where that reference was coming from. I don't know if it actually happened or not. But I do want to just say that, you know, the Board of Selectmen through Mr. Kadim and through the Chief of Police are the ones who dictate what patrols are going to happen and in what neighborhoods and where. Obviously, the Board of Selectmen don't sit back and give direction on that. We leave it up to the chief and Mr. Kadim to work out. So I would just want to reassure residents or any residents that are there, especially the resident that wrote that email, that patrols will be continuing as are designated by the administration. So through us, by Mr. Kadim and the chief. So that's all.
All right, Mr. Andrick, I concur. I got a separate email from a different resident in that same neighborhood, you know, mentioning the same concern. So thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. So I just received one this evening saying the same thing. Just one final comment. There's nothing else from the rest of the board here. You know, again, I think for the residents at home trying to understand, you know, the actions that we took and who took what and why. Listen, it was pretty simple for me that when you have a development and a community, you know, a group of residents here who are dealing with some safety issues, you know, while I appreciate it's the cut through and the convenience, you know, roadway to get to Stop and Shop and to CVS, and it's been used for 30 years. You know, this town has changed a lot. It's changed a lot, even in the last 10 years. It's grown a lot, even up here in the North End. So, and, you know, to add to it with the current pandemic and people being home and driving around and utilizing these roads a little bit more than what they normally would during the course of a day, you know, the traffic patterns are going to change, and we have to be able to address them on an as needed basis. This is about the safety of these people, you know, within the neighborhood, their children, their grandchildren. You know, was the actions taken a bit extreme? Sure, I could see that point of view, but, you know, quite honestly, if you put speed bumps on Plainfield Street, and yes, you could put a no trucks passing up and down Plainfield. Guess what? Those trucks are still going to use Plainfield, and you're going to take those big, heavy tractor trailers, and they're going to slam off off a speed bump, and now you got those residents on that road who are going to call you, reach out, complaining about their houses shaking and rattling, from the vibrations of the truck. It happens. I just got done dealing with a pothole in a truck situation on another road. Please just be thoughtful and mindful of these residents and what their need is, it's just requires a little bit more patience and another couple of minutes of your time to go through that stoplight there at Baker's Corner and to be able to access, Stop and Shop and CVS. And it just takes a little bit of patience and, thinking of our other neighbors, and the other people in our community, not just the extra 30 seconds that we're saving ourselves. So, but that's it for me on this topic. If nobody else has anything else, what to continue on to item H, reconsideration of the Pine Street Memorandum of Understanding. Mr. Kadim.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just before you is a email from legal counsel after reviewing the memorandum of understanding. You have two documents. You have one document that is the red line version, so you can see the changes that are being made. And the second document is a finalized copy, assuming that all the changes were accepted. I will note that just to highlight that Attorney Fair did point out that in reviewing the minutes, he felt that the board did not provide a reason for an emergency or stated emergency, and it was just his suggestion that the board reconsider taking that vote to highlight what the emergency was, so not to be in violation of the bylaw.
If I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Mr. Andrade.
So that comment to me is a little concerning, and I'm not in favor of amending the motion to consider the term emergency. And the reason being is that we developed and had the conversation that evening based on the fact that the bylaw was developed to preserve the infrastructure and financial investment of the town and our roadways. In coming up with the approach that we came up with, we've managed to preserve that while allowing for the future benefits of any development or residence that's going to be put in. We've done it in this particular fashion, and as we discussed that evening, this is a chip seal application, and in order to preserve the recent chip seal application that was applied, we're having the developer overlay the chip seal. I believe it's 100 feet total in length, if not 100 feet in either direction. So it's either 50 feet in one direction and 50 in the other, or 100 in one direction and 100 in the other. I forget the exact number, but we did that intentionally to ensure that the chip seal application, which is not a new roadway installation, it's a overlay over the existing roadway, that the investment that the town put into that roadway would be maintained. It's not a patch. It's nothing to that point. We actually intentionally extended it to preserve the infrastructure, the financial interest that the town had in that roadway. In another application, which was a mill and overlay scenario, we actually had the property owner go to the nearest adjacent existing seam in the mill and overlay to again do just that. Preserve the financial investment that the town put into the roadway. If we, for some reason, a year from now, were to turn to a roadway that we did a mill and overlay on, and decided to redo that roadway for some absurd reason, we wouldn't be in violation of the bylaw, because though there would be a moratorium in effect, we would simply be replacing as long as we did the entire roadway, we would simply be replacing the financial investment that the town made with another. And that's all that we're doing in what this MOU and how this MOU was developed and drafted. And in this instance, and in the other instance where we said with the mill and overlay to go to the nearest seam, we're continuing down the same road. We're making sure that the town's financial investment of the roadway, which is where the bylaw came from for the moratorium, was preserved. So I'm not in favor of amending the language to say emergency in any way, because the way this is said, the developer is taking it upon himself, at our request, obviously, to preserve the town's financial investment in that roadway by going above and beyond and doing the additional, I believe it's a total of 100 feet of chip seal. So that way we have a seamless roadway the way we currently have now.
Okay. Do we lose Mr. Zora? No, I guess he's out. Yeah, do we have any other, Mr. Vieira, do you have anything?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Zora, you good?
You're muted.
Yeah, I got a
I'm
thumbs
good.
up from him. Yeah, what are your thoughts based on, Mr. Kadim here? I'm going to redirect to you. What are your thoughts based on the recommendations from, the attorney?
I just think, Attorney Fair would basically tell the board that it's just his recommendation. The board just obviously needs to make a decision as to whether or not they want to follow the recommendation. But just going through it, he was obviously just doing his due diligence on the category bylaw 18. So that was all.
Okay. So I would, concur with Mr. Andrade here on this. I think all the reasons that he stated, and we discussed the last time, while I have my issues with the bylaw itself, and the bylaw needs to be addressed, so that we're not continually coming across this, and maybe we need to, and I think probably what we should do is take a look at getting that done for Springtown meeting. Looking ahead here so that we can look at the different types of paving that we're doing, set up certain requirements, protecting town investment, et cetera. So while I imagine it was well intended years ago, Lord knows, I know prior boards, preceding those that may even be that were even on here, have managed to have some non-emergency, if we wanted to really utilize that term, non-emergency exceptions that were granted. So, that said here, I guess what do you need from us here, Sean? Do you need a motion to approve, but without the emergency language?
Yeah, so I would just need the board to accept the modifications that were made. And I said red line changes, my copy's red. I believe the changes that were in your packet might be blue.
They're blue.
So you can just follow through. I would say that in item number 2 with a statement of facts, I would just eliminate pursuant to an emergency determination.
So moved.
And then conditions of agreement, similar, or I would just make a blanket motion to eliminate pursuant to emergency determination language that is referenced in the contract to be removed, or the MO, I'm sorry, the MOU.
So the motion is to accept the MOU with, to accept the MOU with the exception of language referencing pursuant to an emergency determination.
Correct.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, good. I just want to get Mr. DeValley, and I have Mr. Cabral. I'm going to open, they just had a couple. Mr. Cabral, I'll let you go.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to bring to your attention under the conditions of agreement, new paragraph 7. There's a dollar amount in there for the performance bond that was not filled in. My recommendation for that amount is $30,000 based upon calculations that I finished up in this regard. So just to kind of make sure it's all clean and concise here, it's that last paragraph under the conditions of agreement.
Okay.
Third page.
Yep.
Yep.
Page 3. Mr. Cabral, does that also include what you project out cost-wise from, from now for that year of 2025?
Yes, I've taken that into consideration, and that dollar amount again is the $30,000.
And that's at prevailing wage?
Yes.
Is that enough, Dave, do you think?
Yeah, that sounds a little, and I apologize to be second guessing you. I guess I kind of am, though, again, I'm going to apologize again. But it's 100 feet of roadway, full width of the roadway, including, are you just looking at the chip seal, or are you looking at the mill and overlay below it as well?
No, I'm including both. So the mill and overlay, I did calculations, and again, it's, basically I use the number of 150 feet because I'm figuring about 20 feet separation between water and gas trenches, 5 feet each of those, and then 50 feet either side of the limits of the trench disturbed. So without complicating it, it's going to be 150 foot of road, full width, mill and overlay, and then the rubberized chip seal over it. And I got prices for the rubberized chip seal directly from the contractor. The prices for the mill and overlay are based upon twice what I would normally be charged by my vendor in fairness to the work they would have to do on such a short section of roadway, but it does take that into account, as well as police details and all the other things I could think of that go along with it, including erosion control.
Wow.
I was expecting this number to be closer to 50 or even higher.
Me too.
So I have one bit of information for the attorney's perspective here. One thing in this whole bit is you're not going to be able to get a contractor to go out and do the rubberized chip seal. The vendor that we have in town, they're kind of unique in that this is the type of work they do. So in terms of the attorney there, Mr. Brainsky, if he's listening, the recommendation is that this work would need to be done under the purview of the DPW contract that is in place, because no one's going to come out here, including this contractor, to do 150 foot of road. So he would do this work at a slightly higher cost, not much more though, but under the purview of the town with the contract that is in place as part of other work we have going on, because they do work all over New Hampshire, Vermont, and no one's going to come to Seekonk to do a 150 foot section of roadway of rubberized chip seal. So with that said, the price there for that portion of the work is kind of unique that way, that it would have to be done through DPW. The applicant would not be able to find anybody that would do that work, you know, without an extensive cost associated with it. So that's the one caveat to the applicant, and they should fully understand that in order for that work to occur, that it would need to be done through the DPW direction and the contract that's currently in place.
So, Mr. Cabral, would you recommend that they get confirmation of the vendor in place in order to be able to do it before they even cut the road?
Yeah, I kind of behind the scenes kind of took care of that already, but I just wanted to let them know that, you know, the specifications, we have it kind of worded in there that we have to comply with our spec. And basically there's one vendor that I know of anywhere in this whole general area that even does this work. And my direct conversation with them this morning that they had with me was they're willing to do the work, provided it's done through me as the DPW director, that we schedule, perform the work, and the contractor just reimburse the town in that regard for actual costs. Because they quite frankly said they're not coming to Seekonk to do 150 foot of road on their own. They would have to do it as part of some other work we currently have going on. And we're fortunate because we do have work planned, Elm Street and a section of Greenwood Avenue, and things of that nature. Right. That's basically what they're looking for.
Got it.
They understand though that doing the work for us, it's going to cost them more again, because, or it's going to cost us more, I should say, because we got to pay prevailing wage.
It's the prevailing wage is worked in. It's not going to cost the town anymore because the contractor is going to be liable for paying the fee for this portion of the work. So they would essentially be reimbursing the town for the work performed by our current vendor that does this work.
Right, I understand that, but just the fact that we have to obviously pay the prevailing wage, which I realize that we're going to turn obviously over to the contractor, but it's costing obviously somebody more money than it needs to.
Yeah, I think what Mr. Cabral was trying to say was because there's not a whole lot of options out there in terms of vendors, that even with the prevailing wage, it probably is cheaper than if the individuals are able to get a vendor to come in and do it.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, as long as you think $30,000 covers the cost and that there's nothing left over for the town to pick up any bill or whatever on this, that's my main concern on this. Make sure that we've covered all angles on this, because right now is the time to set that number. So if the number's 50,000, it's 50,000, but if you think it's 30, yeah.
And listen, this is the performance bond, right? This is the contract and not doing the work that he's being asked to do anyway as part of the development. So this is the money that's going to be left in place if the workmanship is not done properly to protect the town, that we would have this money to go off and do it on our own. It's like a surety. The contractor is expected to do the work. If they fail to perform to do the work, we have that money in hand because they're going to be paying the cost of this. We're not, it's not like they're paying the town to do the work. They're doing the work, and if the surety doesn't get used, they get that back.
Right.
So understood. We just want to make sure. We just want to make sure you've got enough to cover it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So-
Yeah,
So for
because at the end of the day
standpoint-
here, I'm not saying, Mr. Cavalli, apologize, for not speaking direct to you, but if we've had situations where a developer goes belly up after they do the development, and then we're left holding the bag. We can't get back and we can't get any more out of it. So it's, at the end of the day, we just want to make sure we've got the money, to be able to take care of what we need to.
Mr. DeValley, can I ask you a question?
Sure. Am I on?
Paul,
Yep.
you may be able to answer it as well. I don't
Yeah, I'm
know
here.
the cost associated, but what's the cost with a $30,000 performance bond? Anybody, a rough idea?
It depends. I'd have to shop around with bond companies or something, whether it be, 10% or something like that's probably pretty typical, maybe 5, depending.
5%? Did you
Or
say
10,
it?
I think might be more typical. Again, I hadn't priced it out yet, but from a little bit of research.
So, and the reason why I'm asking is the cost difference between a $40,000 and a $30,000 bond, or a $50,000 and a $30,000 bond, is not life altering, correct?
No, I don't think it's game changing. If the board was more comfortable with, like you said, 40 instead of 30, to have a little more buffer if you're worried about the number. So
No, I'm going to turn to Mr. Cabral. Mr. Cabral, this is your chance. If you are 100% solid in your $30,000 number, okay, fine, we move with the $30,000 number, but you just heard the developer saying it's not life altering. So if you think that, if you have any inkling that it's going to be 35 or 40, now's your chance to do 40. If you want to leave it at 30, I motion to keep it at 30.
Yeah, and, I'm comfortable with the 30. I understand what you're saying in terms of the have it a little bit higher isn't all that much more costly. It is to be in effect through August of 2025. I'm comfortable with the 30. I understand where the board's coming from. If you collectively decide to make it more, I wouldn't be opposed to a 40,000, obviously. But I try to give you a real number that I think, realistic for the town to protect the town.
So I'm not looking to change that number on you unless you feel you want the number changed. So I think, at least for myself, I'm asking you, do you want it changed or do you want to leave it at 30?
I'm pretty comfortable at the 30.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't come and say I need more.
I was waiting for
So
that.
the contractor's going to do the work correct the first time anyway, right?
All right, there you go. That's how you're gonna go.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a motion. I have a second. Mr. Cavalli, is there anything else you'd like to add?
yeah, I only wanted to add, I don't think I got a copy of those red line, blue line comments or whatever they are with revisions and such. If the board's acting on them, that's fine. Just before anything's executed, I just want to be able to give it a once over. I don't think anything's going to jump out at me, but just so I can review them. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, typically we don't send the red line versions until the board has reviewed it. And
Okay.
agreed. So we'll get you a copy in the morning.
Great.
Okay. Do we have anybody else looking for comment? I don't think so. All right. That being said, I'd like to take a roll call vote, please, starting with you, Mr. Vieira.
Dave Viera, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
David Andrew, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Okay, second quarter budget discussion, item I.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to do a screen share. So the first thing I just want to let people know that are watching at home. I'm sorry, let me just do my screen share here. The presentation that we're going to be sharing is at home. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So the presentation is on the webpage. If you go to seekonk-ma.gov, under news and announcements, you'll see the second quarter budget update presentation. Click on that. You'll get the PDF to the second quarter budget review, and you'll be able to follow along with everything that I'll be presenting here tonight. Can everybody still see the screen?
Yep.
Okay. So the second quarter budget review, this is where we really get a little bit more of insight into how we're doing from a financial standpoint based on the budget that we've put together. Fiscal year 21 budget to date is balanced with no major issues identified. Salaries and expenditures are still trending below the budget forecast, which is good for us. The overall revenue numbers are tracking ahead of budget projections. We've finally have finalized the state budget numbers. I say we, the state legislation has finalized the state budget numbers. And as anticipated, they were going to be cuts to unrestricted local aid in Chapter 70. We were anticipating about a $30,000 reduction on the town side in terms of unrestricted local aid. It actually came in at $40,809. We'll be able to absorb that into our expenses and our revenues, which are doing well. And on the school side, we were anticipating a reduction in Chapter 70 of roughly about $120,000. That came in a little bit higher. It's at $135,612. As was agreed to and mentioned by the school department, they would be absorbing that reduction of the Chapter 70. So we'll be going to town meeting to modify our revenue numbers accordingly. As everybody recalls, when we first put the budget together, we did not make any cuts over on the school side. We notified them that if there were any further reductions coming from state aid, that they would obviously have to be covering that. As the board is aware, fiscal year 2020 free cash was certified on September 16th. Again, the general fund certification was $2,456,178. Enterprise funds, $457,054. So as we go through the second quarter, we're really doing looking at two different budgets. We're looking at the current year budget, and then we're also starting to begin building the FY22 budget. I did forward over to the board the department head request, which is just an initial request that is put into Munis by the department heads. So you get to see what their requests are. At this point, we don't have any state revenue numbers, so we haven't really looked at that. Over the last 2 weeks, myself, Bruce Alexander, and Carol Ann Days have been meeting individually with department heads to just do a first pass through of the FY22 budget. And we also had conversations about the FY21 budget, looking six months out to make sure that we are still on track and that there are no issues proceeding. The governor's numbers were supposed to be released today. I did not check to see if they were released. I'll do that tomorrow, but they were anticipated to be released today. So we'll get a sense once that the numbers are released, this budget is released, where we really stand in terms of local aid coming in from unrestricted local aid in Chapter 70 coming in from the state, so that we can work on this closing a budget gap at the end. So once we go through that entire process, we'll reconvene with the department heads and hopefully have a better understanding based on revenue numbers and fees that the department heads are proposing, or any changes that we have, and trying to close that budget gap. We'll have some talks. I can tell you that the initial meetings, the department heads have done a phenomenal job. There are not a whole lot of increases. There's one or two departments. And as I mentioned, the budget is a very, we finally gotten to the benchmark portion of the budget. So FY22, we're not anticipating a whole lot of increases there, obviously with the exception of collective bargaining adjustments or fixed cost increases that we'll have. So that looks good there. So from the assessor's office, just quarter two updates. The residential market growth, and I had this one number last year for the last quarter, was just FY20, but just to give you a comparison, the average residential value was $361,100. This year, now that we got the tax recap finalized and all our numbers into the gateway system for the Department of Revenue to certify, the average residential value for FY21 is $370,100. As the board is aware of the tax recap, there was a classification hearing that was held on November 18th. The board approved that. They did a tax factor. The recap was then submitted to the Department of Revenue on November 19th, and it was approved on November 25th. I do want to take the opportunity to acknowledge Lydia Cadero and Richard Gonzalez, who worked diligently to make sure that we had this turnaround. I know you folks appreciate and understand that the staffing levels in the assessor's department was down, but on top of not having not having the optimal staffing levels that they needed, there was also a conversion that was taking place amongst all the tax recap and numbers that needed to be run. So I acknowledge that, and I want to thank them because, as the board knows, if we don't get our tax rate certified, we can't get out bills, our tax bills out, and that really delays the cash flow coming in, which could hamper, the financial stability of the town. So we were able to do a great job on that. Just in terms of staffing updates, the Board of Assessors did interview 2 finalists for the position of Assistant Assessor on January 16th. Just waiting to hear from them on what their decision was. As the board is aware, I did sit on an interview panel with Carol Ann Days, Lydia Cadero, and Richard Gonzalez, and we interviewed, I believe it was 5 candidates, and we recommended the top 3 to the Board of Assessors. One of the top 3 pulled out as they were going through the scheduling the interviews for the final interviews with the assessors. Treasurer's Office, the bond anticipation notes, as the board's aware, the Aiken School addition was issued on ban, which is bond anticipation note, was issued on September 11th, 2020. We anticipate a renewal of the outstanding bans for the Aiken School window repair and the $3.5 million for the Aiken School addition. I'm sorry, I just need to minimize this. In the spring, with plans to bonds for both projects in the fall of 2021. We also are anticipating borrowing in the spring of 21 for the Senior Center Phase 2 and for the South End Fire Station, which will cover the costs associated with the OPM and the architectural services. Calendar year end, there was reconciliations of the W-2s, which are complete, printing and distribution by January 31st, which is the requirement. There was the reconciliation of the non-employee compensation forms. Those are formerly known as the 1099s. That's underway, and printing and distribution will be completed by the 31st. Preliminary reconciliations of the 1095Cs, which are the Affordable Care Act reporting requirement, has begun, and we will meet the deadline for March 2nd. As the board is aware, I did provide an update. ExecuTime, which is the time reporting system, which also includes accruals and things of that nature, has been going and has been built. The Treasurer's Office has done a phenomenal job. They've really been the ones that have been building up the system from behind the scenes to make sure that payroll and all the payroll functions are going to be able to be executed once we go live. They participated in 8 full-day trainings for the implementation. It wasn't done all at one time, but there was also some additional work behind the scenes on top of these additional training days that they had for implementation. The anticipated go live estimate is for the end of February, or I should say the last payroll period in February. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry, here we go. The Collector's Office Quarter 2 update. The FY20 tax title process, unpaid taxes were advertised as of November 20th. The takings were effective December 4th and recorded at the Registry of Deeds on December 31st. For trash bills, the FY20 unpaid balances were liens on the actual FY21 real estate bills that were just went out on December 31st. The FY21 demands were issued November 19th and were due, were due December 3rd. FY21 actual real estate and personal property bills were issued and mailed by the 31st, as I mentioned earlier. So in terms of the FY21 revenue summary, so here we just really capture some of the higher revenue items, just so that you can get a good perspective on what's going on. So if you look at the chart here, we're slightly under what our forecast is, which is typical, because with the real estate, we budget 100%, but Obviously in any given year, we never really reach 100% collection. There are outstanding payments that go into tax title, but we do eventually collect that. So that's why we show the 100%. So the delta that you're seeing there is strictly due to the real estate portion of that. So at midway, we're at 48.4%, which is a great collection rate. The commitment for the year is $42,202,976,000. And year to date, we've collected $20,406,844. So that's on target. Personal property, the commitment for the year, $3.6 million. We've collected 1.6 million. That's a collection rate of 4.3. That's on target. Our budget amount for the halfway point was $1.4 million. So you'll see the comparison. While it's not at 50%, we see fluctuations in the quarters. So to get a true budgeting perspective there, we're right on target as to where we need to be. Motor vehicle also on target, $2.6 million for a commitment. Year to date, $361,000, collection rate of 13.9%. And I say that's on target because our big commitment is just about going out. So that's going out this month, and that's in the amount of $2.2 million. So with 16,000 motor vehicle excise bills going out. So we'll see this number get back up to where we need to be for Q3. So meals tax and hotel tax, while I think it's important to note here, while we are on target, or actually above target, I have a note here for you folks just to understand that the hotel tax is actually being flagged. I'm honoring this. The meals tax, we budgeted for the full year only 75%. So we assumed first quarter we wouldn't see any receipts coming in from the meals tax because of COVID. And then in the hotel tax, we budgeted 80% for the year, expecting obviously not to see 20% within in the first quarter. However, with the hotel tax, while it's showing a commitment of $620,297,000 collected and a collection rate of 48%, when you look at the first payment that we received from the state compared to the second payment that we've seen, first payment was roughly $212,000. The second payment coming in for the second quarter was only $85,000. So we were about $126,000 off compared to the first set of revenues coming in for the hotel tax. If this would have been happening on the meals tax, I would have said that's what we anticipated. It's actually an opposite. It flipped. Meals tax is really, really strong compared to what we anticipated. And it's actually the hotel tax that's doing the opposite of what we anticipated. That being said, we're only talking about $620,000 of our overall revenue for roughly $60 million budget. So we're not overly concerned about this, but I think it's kind of interesting to see what's, and I'm not quite sure what's really playing into it, because we had that first quarter of $200,000 and then, quarter two, only $85,000. So if the trend continues at $85,000 or $90,000, we'll probably be off our budgeted numbers for hotel tax, about $120,000. But again, all the other local receipts are looking very well. So we'll make that difference up in other areas. So there's no over concerning things that we need to worry about. But just really wanted to highlight that to the board because I know the meals tax and the hotel tax has been something that we've been trying to monitor closely. Tax title quarter two update, real estate tax title, 58 parcels currently in tax title. 23 new parcels were added from the last quarter one budget update. We have 3 active payment plans that are in process for tax title. Tax possessions, we're currently working with the tax title attorney to set up an auction for the tax title process. Parcels that the board has approved for Chris DeFonts to go ahead and auction off as the custodian of tax title. The tax foreclosure cases, 20 plus cases moving through the land court. We have the tax title attorney sending demand letters, which will be sent to the new accounts. And then the new cases will be sent to land court to go through that process. For the FY21, just the budget and actuals, as you can see here, bottom line, looking at salaries, we're at 46.6%, expenses through halfway through 50.2%. So we're doing very, very good. Not a whole lot to highlight for you folks, but education, 60.6%. That's just Bristol Aggie, as I mentioned at the last quarter, having 8 new students that we didn't anticipate for. So we have a fund advisory for that. That should be able to be addressed within all the other expense lines items with a year-end transfer. Other environmental, while that looks high in terms of salary, that's a 73.1%. Just to remind everybody that the conservation salaries are split between the general fund and the revolving account. So it's a 60-40 split. So we draw down the 60% of the salaries in the beginning, then we go into the revolving account. So that's why it's a little higher there. And then debt and interests, that 64.4%. We paid a larger portion of our debt early in the year, which at the end of the year, that percentage will make the adjustments. Everywhere else, all the other departments are looking very good in our, for the most part, under budget, and the department heads are doing a good job of monitoring and managing their budgets and their line items. This is just a graph to depict the salaries. So you can see here, second quarter salaries, again, below the trend, which is good. Obviously, all the open positions are really driving this. And I say, while we're under budget, you know, that's a good thing. I think the open positions are drawing some strains on our departments and the additional amount of work that folks are having to pick up to ensure that the services and the continuity of services are being provided. But we're seeing, as it currently stands, a savings of $433,795 in the salary line items overall. For budgeted expenses, a similar situation. The projections here are $1.3 million below. We've got some encumbrances in here, so we'll kind of level off, but we anticipate to have some significant savings here as we continue to roll through, bearing any unforeseen circumstances over the next 2 quarters. With that, I'll open up to questions for the board if there are any.
Thank you. Any members with some questions?
Just go one.
Mr. Zora?
Sean, the meals tax, I thought we had projected 0%, what you were going with.
Yeah, 0% for the first quarter.
Okay.
So that's why we budgeted 75% overall for the year.
Okay.
And then it was, we reduced the first quarter, the overall year by 20%. So we were only anticipating 80% of the revenues that we've seen in past years.
All right. And the governor releases his numbers.
It was anticipated today, so it may have been, but I didn't go online to check to see if they were released.
No issue. Okay.
All right. Sean, for a reference standpoint for residents here, when you had discussed the bans that were issued and more specifically the Aiken expansion for the 9 million.
Yes.
That we issued back in September, that was included in the property taxes. The first installment of that was included in the property taxes that were just sent out in the most recent.
It was.
Okay.
Yep.
So that said, you know, just so residents understand that, you know, there's been some discussion, obviously, of the property taxes and everybody getting their bills, et cetera. But one of the, you know, big causes for that jump was because of the 9 million that we, you know, just took on the books.
Yep.
Okay. You had made mention with regards to the hotel tax, and obviously, you know, a pretty significant change for a second quarter. How good do you had made mention that you think that your possible shortfall in the hotel and meals tax collectively would be 128,000?
So I was just talking about on the meals tax. I'm sorry, the hotel tax piece. So I think the hotel tax, to be honest with you, is probably going to make up for the loss that we're seeing in the hotel tax. It was just interesting because I don't know what's really driving that number. I mean, it's a pretty significant decrease, and there hasn't been really much in terms of you know, guidelines or restrictions coming down from the state that would really kind of impact that. So especially when you're looking at Q1 and you're seeing, and I don't have the number in front of me, but I think it was like $212 or $217,000 for that first payment. And then significantly dropping off to the 85,000, you know, to say that there's been a significant drop off in usage, you know, there was no indication of that, I guess. Yeah, I would have anticipated seeing it maybe in the first quarter, since we were still just coming out of that first initial, you know, shutdown, if you would. So
this could just be an effect of, you know, having now all of a sudden we had this second surge that hit us here and it hit us really in the second quarter.
Yeah.
Where now all of a sudden we've got cases that are high. Everybody's got cases that were higher than what they were even in the spring.
Right.
Yeah, that may just be putting a cramp on the traveling. So
yeah,
let's not lose sight of the fact that travel hasn't been opened up, right?
Right. So there's a lot of that. Mr. Vieira?
I would say it's based on travel, number one, but number two, don't forget, like the Dunkin' Donuts Center, it's closed obviously in the city of Providence. They're not having the tournaments and those sorts of things that they've been having in the past. And usually when they're having those sorts of activities in the city of Providence and the surrounding cities, they come to Seekonk for hotels. So when the activity is down, obviously in the city, our activity is going to be down as far as hotels go. So I would say that probably played a big part.
Yeah, and it's just going to be interesting to see what the third quarter brings in terms of revenue, because I think that's really going to dictate what we're going to be seeing over the next couple of quarters after that, and probably what we're going to use for a basis in making the determination of where our revenues are going to be for FY22.
Yeah, I think we really need to pay attention, and as Mr. Sullivan and I stressed the last budget cycle, going into FY22, I think we really need to be conscious of what might happen, because again, if we're going to feel an effect, it's going to be in FY22, where people have had almost, obviously, a good part of a year, if not a year, in being out of work and not getting the revenues coming into them as they're used to getting. So they're going to start coming up short with either excise tax or property tax or something of that nature. So I think we need to be prepared to address that and do something, whatever we can, to address the needs of the people of the community in helping them with their taxes.
Yeah. Mr. Kadim, sorry, let me spit this out here. Just from a tax payment cycle perspective, this is everything collected through December?
Through December, yep. So that was the preliminary bills. So it does not include the new bills that went out, the actual bills.
Okay.
Got two quarters left to collect. Right. In terms of real estate.
How about for the hotel and meal, or the hotel?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, those taxes as well. Yep. Okay. Yeah. So it's a month behind. So it's not capturing December.
Okay, that's going to be my next. I mean, if there's going to be anything kind of carrying the weight, I mean, it's still behind. Don't get me wrong, and that's concern. But December tends to be a little bit more of a opportunity.
Yeah. So what we typically do, we capture actually June in our next fiscal year. So we have 6 months worth of revenue, I would say.
Gotcha.
So there's just a rolling lag throughout the fiscal year.
Gotcha. Okay, I don't want to belabor it. Again, I mean, it's in the grand scheme of things, it's, you know, we're against our $61 million budget. It's not huge, but it's still something that we rely on here in town. And
yeah,
you know,
and like I said, I think we've done a good job of trying to forecast. You know, it's just funny that what we anticipated for meals tax is actually the opposite in hotels. So they've kind of just swapped places. So we have enough, obviously, between the meals tax and the hotel tax to cover what our estimates were. So at the end of the year, I'm comfortable we'll be you know, fine with the revenue numbers there.
Yeah, if you continue to manage the expenses the way you guys have been at this point, I think it'll certainly offset what we're not getting, what we're not collecting. So
yep.
Please remain vigilant on that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. like to continue on to item J. Consider the donation in the amount of $25 from John and Judith Carney for the Human Services gift account.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Roll call, please, Mr. Viera.
Dave Viera, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
Aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Item K, consider the donation in the amount of $25 from Mildred DeSoucy for the Human Services gift account.
So moved.
Second,
Mr. Viera.
Dave Viera, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
Daniel, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Thank you very much to the, thank you very much to the Carneys and Ms. DeSoucy for your gifts to the Human Services. Item L, consider the approval of minutes from January 6th, 2021.
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion? Mr. Viera, roll call.
So Dave Viera, aye.
Chris Zora, aye.
Daniel, aye.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Community speaks. If we have anybody that's in attendance that would like to speak under this, if you could please raise your hand. See a couple of people in the attendees. Okay, nobody is raising their hand in that section. Other business, discuss other topics not reasonably anticipated by the chairman 48 hours before the meeting. There's nothing that I'm aware of. Mr. Kadim, is there anything? You're on mute.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Town administrators report.
Mr. Chairman, nothing at this time. I just gave the update on the executive time and DPW facility. I just need to circle back with Mr. Cabral and Mr. Lobrion.
Okay. Board of Selectmen liaison reports, Bristol County Advisory Board. There's nothing new to report there. Aiken School Expansion Committee.
nothing new at this time.
Q. 540 Arcade Ave.
Nothing new at this time, Sean, unless you have something. I didn't make the last meeting.
No, I don't have anything at this time.
Okay, thank you. Veterans Council.
Nothing new to report.
South End Fire Station.
Nothing new to report. We'll be meeting again shortly after the 10th when the OPM, interest in the OPM position will obviously be discussed, and obviously the award made to whomever.
Gotcha. You guys, what was the date? I popped in on that meeting. Was that last?
So February 10th was the bid deadline. So
That's correct.
I think that Thursday, maybe the 11th is when you set up
The
the meeting.
11th, the day after, that's correct. Yep.
And just
Gotcha.
to jump in, I was sharing the information, keeping the chairman up to speed. We've had significant interest in the RFQ for the OPMs. We had about 17 as of last Thursday, the close of business day on Thursday of last week. So hopefully, I'm not sure how many of them will be submitting, but we should have a good amount of bids to go through and different options to review. So that's a positive.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent. All right.
Bid
Board
elevations.
of Selectmen reports. I'll start with you, Mr. Viera. Do you have anything?
I've had a request for an additional stop sign. If Mr. Cabral could take a look at it at the intersection of Pravaza and Hull Street. There is a stop sign there now, but to be in concurrence with Pravaza and Ipswich, the individuals in that intersection would like to see a four-way stop. So if Mr. Cabral could look at that, please.
Yeah, where was that again?
Pravaza and Hull.
In Hull, is that what you said?
Hull Street, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There is a stop sign there now, but they would like to see it
4.
the same as Ipswich and Pravaza, four-way stop.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
And I am a candidate for reelection in April, just to get it out there.
Very
Stop
good.
sign?
What was that?
You're talking about the stop sign issue?
I already talked about that. I just announced that I am a candidate for reelection.
Oh, I thought you.
I think he's telling you to stop, four-way stop.
Yeah,
Mr. Zora.
Sean, if we could have Mass DOT, we're starting to see significant potholes open up from, I'm going to say, the start of Newport Creamery going all the way down Route 6 where the newly paved road is in front of Coles going down by Eats.
Yep.
If their pothole division is out scanning the area, if they could do a right down the street, they're starting to come up now. A lot of these potholes. Yeah, that's all I have as far as that goes.
Okay. Mr. Andrade.
I don't have any at this time.
Okay. Mr. Kadim, this one's for you, more on a COVID update. We didn't have it on the agenda here. However, the latest that I've seen is that CVS is going to start doing, vaccinations. And I saw the state had given the CVS down in Somerset. Were we able to make any headway with, Senator Feeney or State Rep Howitt and the state in terms of, I know now that we've got the unit approved up there in Newman Ave, can we get a little bit more pressure in terms of testing and vaccination, all that kind of stuff?
Rep Howitt just sent me an email. There was a representative, I want to say, in either Attleboro or North Attleboro that was also complaining about the lack of testing facilities. I know the South Coast was talking about that as well because all the facilities seem to be starting to, when you start looking at the mapping, north of 495. So there was a petition for the state. They came back saying that they weren't going to open up any new facilities. So a couple of communities actually came together and are going to host a facility working, I guess, with the state. So I've got to follow up with Rep Howitt to see exactly how that was going to be. So they would do a testing facility, and it would be a shared facility with other communities, but there would be a charge associated with it. And I got to go back. I think it might have been maybe like $10 or $15 just to cover the overhead and things of that nature. So I'm going to touch base with Rep Howard to see exactly what's the best approach. If there really is any other, if there really is a lack of consideration from the state coming down for them to host their own, and then maybe try to get some contact information from that facility that just opened up, just trying to get some of the information and the logistics that they needed for that in terms of who's going to be administering the tests, things of that nature.
Yeah.
It was on the
Have you reached out to, I'm sorry, Mr. Viera, what?
I apologize. It was on the news this afternoon that Fall River CVS, the one right off President Avenue, I believe, is administering the vaccine. So
yeah.
Yeah,
they were talking about so the CVSs are going to start administering vaccines, but it was the concern. The concern has been the testing facilities. So there's been a lack of testing facilities on the South Coast, and that's where people are starting to get a little concerned about. And I don't know if CVS is planning on having a joint vaccination and testing facility, but
yeah, I think it looked like this was going to be a phased rollout through CVS, Walgreens, that kind of thing, and obviously Somerset got the green light to do vaccines there. So even if it'd be great if Seekonk was a vaccine site, could be, because I'll be quite honest, I've now done it a couple of times. Going over to McCoy, you can register, get a COVID test at McCoy. You can do a rapid test or you can do a PCR test. It takes 2 minutes. You can find it very quickly online, provide a little information, little insurance information. You're in and out, and it's not that big of a deal. So it's not here in Seekonk. I think if I had my choice between testing site and a vaccine site, I think I'd rather have CVS be a vaccine site.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. So I don't know if we can get some information from.
Yeah, I'll follow up.
that.
The other interesting piece that I just heard in the news the other day, and I know it's a little off topic, but I think it was Virginia or Maryland. they actually decided to go against the guidelines of the rollout on the vaccines, and they've issued it to whoever wants it. So they didn't go through first responders and all that stuff. And I guess the statistics over there was that the numbers are dropping drastically with how they were rolling it out. So it's going to be interesting to see how the trend's going to be throughout the other states.
Yeah. Have you spoken to the Attleboro mayor by chance? Because I know that they were having a lot of issues, and he was getting pretty vocal as well.
No, we haven't had any conversation. I can reach out, but I'll touch base with Howard first to see, because he's going to have some information.
Very good. That's it for me. If nobody else has anything else, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, subsection 21A6, is having discussion in open session would be detrimental to the negotiating position of the town.
Well,
Second,
All right, roll call, please, Mr. Viera.
Dave Viera, aye.
Rosora, aye.
okay.
Justin Sullivan, aye. Thank you, folks. Have a great evening.